I can't believe you do this.
Please, just let me explain.
It's not what you think.
A high-stakes poker game meant to be the ultimate test of skill, and fortune ends in a brutal murder. When one of the players is found dead with a bullet to the head, the stakes take a deadly turn. With everyone at the table having something to gain, who pulled the trigger and what dark secrets are they hiding? This is no ordinary game. It's a deadly game of lies, betrayal, and greed. Get ready for a gripping true crime story that will have you questioning trust, greed, and betrayal. In a high-stakes poker game that ends with a deadly shot to the head, everyone at the table becomes a suspect. Was it a crime of passion or a calculated murder? Subscribe now and let's dive deep into the deadly game where everyone has something to hide. Let's proceed. The Poker Palace was known for its high-stakes games, drawing in the city's wealthiest, most secretive players. It was a place where fortunes were won and lost, where alliances were forged and broken, and where the sharpest minds tested their mettle against one another. But no one expected that one fateful night, the game would end in tragedy. When renowned businessman Victor Reynolds sat down at the table that evening, he never anticipated it would be his last hand. By all accounts, Victor was a regular player, quiet, calculating, and ruthless in his pursuit of victory. He'd won more than his fair share of games, and tonight was no different. The stakes were higher than ever, with millions of dollars on the line. The other players were on edge, each of them knowing that Victor's skill at the table made him a formidable opponent. But when the game finally ended, the last card had been dealt, and the smoke had cleared. Victor was found dead. He had been shot in the head at point-blank range, a bullet lodged in his skull as he lay slumped in his chair. His chips were scattered across the table, and the rest of the players were nowhere to be seen. No one had heard the shot, and the cameras inside the Poker Palace showed nothing out of the ordinary. Victor was alone when the fatal shot rang out, but who had fired it, and why? Detective Claire Thompson was assigned to the case. The Poker Palace was a notorious hotspot for the city's elite, and the murder of a wealthy businessman could not go unnoticed. Upon arrival, Thompson was met with a chaotic scene. Security had immediately locked down the building, and the remaining players had been detained for questioning. The first challenge in the investigation was that all the players had motive. Victor Reynolds was not only a poker player, he was also a cutthroat businessman with a number of enemies. His aggressive takeovers of smaller companies had left a trail of ruined reputations and financially broken individuals. As the investigation unfolded, Detective Thompson discovered that each player at the table had a possible reason to kill him. Daniel Carrington, a former business partner of Victor's, who had lost everything when Victor bought out his company under less than legal circumstances. Daniel had spent years trying to rebuild his wealth, but the betrayal still stung. He had shown up to the game that night, determined to beat Victor at his own game, but was he angry enough to pull the trigger? Martha Lopez, a high-end escort who had been involved with Victor for years. Their relationship had turned sour recently, with Victor pushing her aside for younger models. Martha had been overheard arguing with Victor earlier that evening, and her jealousy over his treatment of her may have pushed her to murder. Tommy the Shark Dunn, a former professional gambler who had been out of the game for several years. He was back at the Poker Palace that night, looking for a big win to settle some serious gambling debts. He owed money to several dangerous individuals and needed to win badly. Victor, with his deep pockets, was the ideal target. Victor's younger brother, Jake Reynolds. A troubled man with a history of criminal activity, Jake had always lived in his brother's shadow. He had recently been cut off from the family's wealth and was desperate for money. Victor had made it clear that he would no longer support Jake, and their relationship had become increasingly strained. Each suspect had been at the table that night, and each had their own potential motive for murder, but there was no concrete evidence, no fingerprints, no weapons, and no clear path to the killer. Detective Thompson was meticulous, digging into each suspect's background. She found that while each had their reason to want Victor dead, none of them were acting suspicious enough to warrant an immediate arrest. That was until she turned her attention to the Poker Palace's security footage. Despite the cameras not capturing the actual moment of the murder, they did show something important, an unaccounted-for gap in the footage. The cameras in the back of the room had been briefly disabled, which just so happened to coincide with the exact time of the shooting. Someone had deliberately tampered with the system, and Detective Thompson quickly realized that the person responsible was still inside the building. Using the timestamps from the footage and a thorough analysis of the players' movements, Thompson pieced together a critical clue. When the footage resumed, it showed Martha Lopez returning to the main game area, visibly shaken. But it wasn't just her reaction that stood out. Upon reviewing her attire, Thompson noticed a small bloodstain on her dress, a stain that hadn't been there when she entered the room. As Thompson confronted Martha, the truth came to light. Martha had indeed been the one to fire the fatal shot. Her emotional outburst earlier in the evening had been fueled by her broken relationship with Victor, but it was more than just jealousy that had driven her to kill. Victor had been blackmailing her, threatening to expose her past and ruin her career if she didn't comply with his demands. In a moment of desperation, Martha had confronted Victor at the poker table. The argument quickly escalated, and in a fit of rage, she had grabbed a gun from Victor's briefcase, hidden under the table, and shot him in the head before anyone could react. The rest of the players had been unaware of the momentary silence that followed the shot, as the cameras and the background noise masked the crime. Martha had then attempted to stage the scene, hoping to make it look like a tragic accident, but her emotions betrayed her. In her panic, she had failed to remove the bloodstain from her dress, and the tampered security footage had sealed her fate. Martha Lopez was arrested and charged with the murder of Victor Reynolds. The motive was clear. She had killed him to protect herself from his blackmail, driven by a mixture of fear, anger, and betrayal. The other players were cleared of any involvement, and the high-stakes game that had promised fortune and fame ended in tragedy, leaving only shattered lives in its wake. As Detective Thompson closed the case, she couldn't help but reflect on the price of obsession, whether it was in business, love, or the pursuit of victory. In the end, it wasn't just a deadly game of poker, it was a game of power, control, and betrayal that had left one man dead and several others changed forever. If you're hooked by the twists and turns of this high-stakes murder mystery, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on the next shocking true crime story. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think really pulled the trigger, and what would you have done in their shoes?